Welcome back to the First and Goal podcast, everyone. And we are here on a Tuesday evening, a jam-packed Tuesday. It was ridiculous. We had a lot of players being franchise tagged today. But the big transaction move, if you will, of the offseason so far, or of the last couple of days, was the Dak Prescott signing. Dak Prescott got signed to a 4-year, $160 million contract yesterday night around 7:30 p.m. That makes him the second highest paid player in NFL history. It just so happens that we have a Cowboy super fan here to give his take on the signing. Mitch?
I know I'm not wearing the jersey. If you saw in the Instagram story, I was wearing the jersey. I was excited. I remember exactly what I was doing. I was just sitting on the couch scrolling through Twitter, as one does. And then I just see casually Tom Pelissero, oh, Cowboys agreed to terms with Dak Prescott. Start jumping up and down like a little girl. But okay, regardless, what are my reactions? As I mentioned, he deserves to be paid top money. This is a guy that we see was on pace for record numbers this year. I'm not saying he was going to throw for those record numbers, but that's what he was on pace to doing prior to his injury. Now, clearly, this means that Dak Prescott has made a significant progression with his recovery, because if he wasn't, Dallas wouldn't be paying him like they are. And we see that the locker room, it was not the same without Dak. We saw a lot of players just kind of give up, and the offense wasn't the same. The numbers declined significantly. And this is a guy that right now is a top 7 quarterback in the league, probably number 7 or 6 if you really want to push it, but top 7 quarterback. This is going to impact the quarterback market a lot, especially since a lot of quarterbacks after 2018 are looking for a brand new deal. And what will this look like with the Dak Prescott trade? There's a lot of questions regarding a lot of the Cowboys, quote unquote, overpaid stars. So it really is an interesting thing. But there's not a single doubt in my mind that the Dallas Cowboys made a poor choice here. He also got a record in signing bonus, which is the most ever in NFL history, most guaranteed money. So I just think that all around it's a win for Dak Prescott. He didn't give in to the Cowboys. Dak won this. The Cowboys can win this if they decide to start winning games.
I definitely agree with that but getting into the overall cap implications, we'll get into that in a second. But for the immediate implications for Dak Prescott, I think this is huge because honestly, I think the Cowboys got a little bit lucky, honestly, because if Dak Prescott played the full season, you know that his agent would have been pushing for 45. This is just how these things work, right? Whether or not you agree that Dak Prescott is worth $40 million or whether he's worth 45, it's inevitable. It was inevitable that he was going to be paid that because he is the next best quarterback up. That is how the market works. That is how the quarterback market especially works. Dak Prescott just so happened to be the next guy up in line. So it makes perfect sense that he got paid $40 million. But if he were to finish out the season and continue on a pace like he did and be in that MVP conversation, there is no doubt in my mind that his agent would have been pushing for $45 million per year. Not a question in my mind. So I think it's very lucky that the Cowboys are able to get Dak Prescott back on a $40 million per year contract. I know that's a ton of money. That is a lot of money to throw around to one guy, but I think it could have been a considerable amount more if he were to finish out the season.
I think that's pretty fair. I mean, he was on pace for over 6,000 yards, which mind-boggling. I believe that's an NFL record. Even if it isn't, that's still a significant number. Now, as mentioned, like what is the cap going to end up looking like? Dak Prescott's cap hit this year is only $22 million, actually. It's a very low cap hit for this year. I was honestly shocked when I saw that. The Cowboys have a bit of money and they have a little bit of wiggle room when it comes to free agency. They can't go after any big dogs. I've heard a lot of like predictions and such. Some I think are absolutely crazy. Some are like, well, it kind of makes sense. But we look at two guys that a lot of people deem are overpaid, Jaylen Smith and Ezekiel Elliott. Jaylen Smith, I've heard nothing so far. I haven't heard any rumors about whether or not he should take a pay cut or whatever it may be. I think that the Cowboys should act on that if he continues to just be like he was last year, which was very disappointing, wasn't doing his job right. But Ezekiel Elliott, what I have heard is that the Cowboys are looking to restructure that contract in some way. I believe they're not trying to cut the money down, but rather extend the amount of money he's getting over a longer period of time, making his stay with the Cowboys a little while longer, which I'm not opposed to. We know what Zeke is. We know what this offense can look like. And I think they don't need help offensively. Obviously, defensively, that's a huge issue. But I think that if they make Zeke's cap hit a little smaller and Jaylen Smith's a little smaller, I think that can benefit them in the long run, which right now looks like they could be in a bit of a predicament if this decides to fall on its face. The signing falls on its face.
Jerry Jones is definitely going to have to do some maneuvering of the cap, whether it be this year or whether it be the next couple of years. It's going to have to happen because, like you said, Dak Prescott's cap hit is only $22 million this season, which for a quarterback is nothing substantial. It's nothing ridiculous. It's nothing crazy, nothing mind-boggling. But, okay, let's look at what his cap hit will be in 2022. $33 million. Okay, now we're getting a little bit warmer. Nothing ridiculous just yet. But 2023 is $44 million and 2024 is $47 million. That is nearly 25% of your cap. Spot on. You're talking about paying multiple guys over $20 million, two guys at the moment, over $20 million besides Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, and DeMarcus Lawrence. Then you have another 5 or so guys above $10 million. You're really going to have to figure out what to do there because you're not going to be able to build a roster together in 2023, 2024 if you stay on the same trajectory that you are. So while I don't disagree with this contract, well, I don't think it was a dumb move in any sense of the word. I think it needed to happen, but they have a lot of work to do because they need in the future, in 2023, starting in 2023, maybe 2022, depending on how the rest of their team looks, they're going to have to significantly cut down on some players. Like you said, Jaylen Smith, Ezekiel, Elliott. Whether those guys are restructured in what way, I don't know. But something is going to have to happen because Dak Prescott's cap hit is too big and the Cowboys have too many holes.
I think that you kind of mentioned they have too many holes. I think that they have few holes but are very significant holes. It's not a matter of, I mean, look at their offense. If like they're beyond like their offensive line, which is starting to age a little bit, beyond that, no problems. Dalton Schultz, Blake Jarwin, 2 great tight ends. Wide receivers need no introduction. Zeke, Tony Pollard, 2 really good running backs, and Dak Prescott, as mentioned, one of the best in the league. But defensively, there's an issue. You brought up DeMarcus Lawrence, how he has a huge cap hit. Sure, but I think DeMarcus Lawrence, I'm sure you can agree, is one of the better pass rushers in the league, and I think he deserves to be paid like he is. But Jaylen Smith shouldn't be paid so much. I think he should stay on the Cowboys, but Jerry Jones in his mind, because of this contract, and look at what he is looking at it in a future trajectory, Jerry Jones he may seem stupid, but he knows what he's doing. Sometimes he seems stupid. I like Jerry Jones, semi, but he knows what he's doing. So he really believes that the Cowboys are in win now, which they are. The Cowboys are in a win now mode. They have to win now while their players are still pretty young. But I don't think Jerry Jones is wrong by saying this roster right now is one of the better rosters in the league. It's going to come down to the draft. I tell people this all the time. Look, I think that the Cowboys could contend this year with a good draft, but that's like a high stakes situation because defensively, that's all they're going to target in the draft. Just defense, corners, safeties, and maybe a linebacker to replace Sean Lee if they so choose it. But really, the draft is going to count for a lot for the Cowboys. And if that can stay healthy, Jerry Jones knows how to build a team. He's built numerous excellent teams that were ruined by who knows what, whether it's a playoff choke or it's poor coaching. But Jerry Jones knows what's up. And Jerry Jones is building a really good team, and people are just hating on the Cowboys because of their fans and me.
Yes, of course you fit into that, and I'm not gonna lie, you fit perfectly into the crazy
I do.
Cowboys.
I absolutely do.
Absolutely.
I wear that like a medal of honor.
Yeah, be proud of it. I take ownership of it. Um, but yeah, I agree with you that this team with a good draft, with the right pieces, I don't want to say that they could win a Super Bowl. I don't want to say that they'll get to the NFC Championship game. They could be competitive. They could potentially they could get into the playoffs. I mean, I'm not going to front. Their offense is incredible. They could get into the playoffs. How far do they go though? That's where, I mean, you don't really know at that point, but they definitely have the offensive talent to win in the regular season if their defense can improve. If you pick up a guy like Caleb Farley, Patrick Surtain, get another defensive back in there who has experience, maybe Javon Holland on day two, another versatile player who can play nickel corner and safety. That's very good. That is a very good starting point. You get a shutdown corner or shutdown potential corner, and then another guy who's versatile, can move back and forth between corner and safety. I think that's a very good start. But this team, this defensive backfield specifically, has a lot of work to do, and there are a good amount of progressing, developing, and infusion of new players infusing new players into the defense that they still have left to do. I truly believe that because while their offense may be there, just despite the offensive line, I just don't think their defense is.
I think that's absolutely it. We saw it in fourth quarter, the whole team woke up. The defense only played in the fourth quarter. The Cowboys are usually off to a slow start, but they can make offensively. They are usually onto a slow start most games, but they can turn on the Jets. We see, why does Dak Prescott have to throw for 500 yards every game, like around there? Sure, he's a quarterback. He should be throwing the ball a lot. But 500 yards, that's because they're down in the fourth quarter. And why are they down in the fourth quarter? Because the defense is a struggle for Dallas. And look, there's a ton of really great defensive talent in this draft. It's not going to be an offensive stack draft. I think this draft class, just looking into it, I mean, we could say this basically for every year, but this draft looks really good. And there are a lot of exciting players that can land anywhere, spanning from day one to even day three. Tons of guys that will slip through the draft, tons of guys that teams will pick up on. But it's very important that Jerry Jones and his yacht decides to be aggressive. By aggressive, I mean pick players that are sure things and not so like just, oh, well, struggle. No, Jerry Jones has to go in with a clear-cut game plan going into this draft, and that's how the Cowboys can succeed in becoming one of the top teams. And sure, they may not contend for Super Bowl right away. Okay, I'm going to believe that. I'm going to say it. But then again, a Broncos fan would say they're ready to contend for a Super Bowl. Most of them, the ones without common sense, of course. But, Jerry Jones I think he's ready for this. I think this is the make or break for Dallas, because if it's a break, they screwed up big time.
Listen, I think it's time for Dallas to stop being just dead on average. I think it is time for Dallas to show progression, show that in 2021, they can be a playoff team. They can win regular season games. But more importantly, they're not going to win the Super Bowl in 2021. But I want to see that they have that potential to do it in 2022 and beyond. Because what are you waiting for? I mean, you have Dak Prescott. You have your wide receivers. You need to retune the offensive line, which is doable. This is a very offensive line heavy draft. You have the running backs in Pollard, Zeke. Defense needs some work. But you have your franchise quarterback. That's the bottom line. So now what are you waiting for? Get it together. Go out and compete.
I think that's pretty fair. They've been like borderline like contenders every single year, it seems. 2014, oh well, we won't talk about 2014 because that's a soft topic. But then 2015, dumpster fire. 2016, nothing was looking up, and then they were like, oh my god, this is the greatest thing ever.
Can we talk about who beat the Dallas Cowboys in the
you hear this
in the 2016 playoffs?
That was also the Cheeseheads Packers. I remember I was really mad, but you know what? Funny enough about that
Jared
game,
Cook catch, that was great.
That was nuts. But funny enough about that game, the Cowboys were down early. They came back and then they lost it in the fourth quarter, like they have been. And I think that if we lower our expectations for Dallas, maybe something that will come up of it, because that seems to be the case. But I think that having too high expectations, Dallas falls either right below it or extremely below it. But if we lower expectations, oh, they'll win 8 games. No, they're going to win 13. So I want to have low expectations, but I can't do it just looking at the star talent, and neither can like almost anybody, because they know this is a team that's capable, even though people don't want to admit it. They know this is a team that's capable of winning 10 plus games, which is realistically all you'll need to win the NFC East and get into the playoffs.
You only need to win like 7 games to win the NFC. So
Oh,
it's
I don't know
not
about
even
next year, but it'll be an interesting
next
one.
year. Next year it'll actually be interesting because the Eagles are still going to be screwed with cap. Giants, if their offense can pick it up, they could be interesting. Washington, if Taylor Heineke,
Oh yeah,
if
he's
Taylor
gonna
Heineke,
save them.
First of all, I know you're a Cowboys fan, but you have to be rooting for Taylor Heineke.
I mean, if he's starting, I have no issues.
Yeah,
But I think that the Reds football team. Oh, sorry. Again, I have a bad habit of this, but I think that the Washington football team is again a team that's honestly the reverse of the Cowboys, kind of, except their offense is better than their defense. But they have a really good defense, and their offense just needs to pick it up.
yeah. If honestly, I think if they get a complimentary wide receiver too, like a solid one, not like a Cam Sims, even though those guys are good, like
Steven
supplementary
Sims.
players. Steven Sims,
Steve
Cam
Sims.
Sims, those guys are good complimentary players. If Taylor Heineke is the guy though, which
I don't think he is.
I love the guy, I love the story, but I'm not sure if he's the franchise. If they can get that franchise guy next year, or I mean, in this upcoming draft, in the next draft, then that is a legitimate team to look out for because that defense is the real deal. That is a ridiculously good defense with a real wide receiver one. You pick up a wide receiver two, I mean, and get your franchise quarterback. That is a dangerous team. But we are getting off track here. There's more news to talk about, a lot more news to talk about.
Shocker.
Yeah, honestly, we haven't had news since the Super Bowl. But franchise tags, there have been a lot of franchise tags, or since the Carson Wentz trade. But a lot of franchise tags. 9 players got franchise tagged between yesterday and today. First of which was Marcus May yesterday. That came out around the Dak Prescott signing, so that got overshadowed a little bit. But Marcus May will be heading back to New York after his breakout season in 2020. He stepped up in the absence of Jamal Adams, and he is absolutely, or was, now that he is tagged, the top priority for the Jets to bring back because Marcus May was the guy on defense. He was the dude. We talked about in the past weeks. Leonard Williams was that guy for the Giants. He was the guy that elevated play. Marcus May was exactly that for the New York Jets. He was the guy on their defense that was like, all right, that's our leader. That's our best player. And we need to rally around him. That is such a vital piece to any defense, specifically any offense or defense. And the Jets, who are a young team, developing team, who I think could be very good going forward. Maybe not in 2021, but the pieces are there for them to be very good. They need to retain their superstars, and Marcus May, arguably their best player.
I think Marcus May is probably their best player. Like Jamison Crowder's their leading receiver. That I think that speaks enough about this Jets team. But I think it's a little unfortunate that Marcus May was not actually able to get a deal done, because this is a guy I liked a lot. You mentioned it. He's the leader on the Jets. He's their best player, obviously, not Sam Darnold, because they will probably end up going with another quarterback. But again, draft talk for another day. The Jets defense is not so great, and Marcus May just happens to shine a light over it. And look, I think this could be very similar to Dak Prescott, but not like at the tones of like the quarterback, but like the safeties. The safety is a valuable position, and there can always be an argument made for who's the best safety in the league. Always, always. It just seems that's the way it is. Unfortunately, there's no predominant like best safety in the league. You can make a case for Minka Fitzpatrick and make a case for Jamal Adams, Justin Simmons, who we'll get into later. But I think Marcus May is a top 10 safety in the league. I think that it's unfortunate that the deal didn't really happen. But again, they still have till July 15th to make the deal. But I think the Jets have to act now and be aggressive on getting their priorities straight, getting a deal done with Marcus May, because this is a guy that they cannot let go of.
Marcus May was Pro Football Focus's fourth best graded safety at 82.9. That's the grade that they gave him. He's just a very good player, a very good safety. Probably a top two safety in this free agency class with probably him and John Johnson. Arguably, you could put Marcus Williams in that category. But May, I mean, he was just incredible in 2020. He really stepped up in the absence of Jamal Adams. So Jets fans are jumping for joy that they get him back because, like you said, like we both said, the best player on the Jets. Now, another guy that I just mentioned, Marcus Williams, the safety for the Saints. Now, this is an interesting one because, as we've talked about before on the show, the Saints are under. They are 10 feet under and they are drowning. They are, I believe, $60 million under the or over the cap now after this, or maybe 70. I don't know. There's something very, very high. Lowest or highest over the cap in the league. And after this, Marcus Williams franchise tag, that does not get any better. So retaining Marcus Williams, while yes, he's a very good player, it just adds that much more work for the Saints.
I mean, I was kind of shocked by this. I was also kind of hoping they wouldn't tag him, so Dallas would sign him. There's a lot of teams that could have signed him, but I think that you just kind of said it. Why? They like Marcus Williams is a fine player, sure, but $10 million, $10 million. That's a lot of money for a team that will probably have to do a lot of restructuring over the next couple of years because the Saints are falling under. They're slowly but surely just going under, and it'll start to show next year when this is not the same Saints team we've watched over the past almost 10 years virtually. There seems to be always a contender, always a really good team. But this year, it's going to be one of the worst Saints years we've seen in a long time, in my opinion.
It's absolutely going to be one of the worst years because they are, let's see, I'm looking it up right now. How far here? You look up how much they are over the cap. But I mean, it's ridiculous how how far over the cap they are. Really ridiculous. And franchise tagging Marcus Williams, well, yes, he is a very good player. Very good player. But you're hurting your team. Because, I mean, I don't know who else you can cut. I mean, we talked about Quan Alexander. He'll give you 13. What? Now you're at $57 million? $47 million? I mean, that's a lot of dollars. The amount of players that you're gonna have to cut down on and restructure to get back to zero is ridiculous.
There's a ton of players, and a guy that they just let go of, Trey Hendrickson. That guy had a really good year. We talked about that last week, I believe, that he had a phenomenal year, and they're just gonna let him walk. And I get it. He's a Saints legend. He missed a tackle on Diggs. Sure, he's also a Vikings legend as well. So congrats to him. He'll always be in eternity. But, I just don't know why I think the Saints at this point should just let the season loss. I'm sorry. The NFC South will be very, very good. Look at the Panthers. That's a team that has a lot of money making moves for Deshaun Watson, which in my opinion can automatically make them contenders. We look at the Bucks. We'll talk about their weapon that they just tagged, which is very smart. Next, and then which team am I missing? I feel terrible. I always miss one team per division. Falcons. Honestly, you know what? No, Falcons are. They could be contenders. I don't know. Again, we'll talk predictions later.
They're kind of bipolar. They can win on any given Sunday, but
they can also lose on any given Sunday.
Yeah,
Can't forget that. They're known for that.
They're like a consistently 7-9, 8-8 team. That's who they are at this point. After that Super Bowl, that's kind of who they are. But I missed on the cap number. They are under or over negative $55 million. That's the amount that they have. So I was off, but I mean,
you were off by $5 million. But in the grand scheme of things, that's
in the grand scheme of things, even if you cut Quan Alexander, $13 million that you gain, what? Let's do math. That's $42 million that you still have to get back. I haven't looked at their cap table recently. I know that Alexander is $13 million, but I don't know what other big chunks you can really take out. I don't know who else you can just say, all right, let's get rid of him. Now we are 50% closer to getting back to zero. I mean, let's look. Michael Thomas, $18 million. Teron Armstead, $16 million. Janoris Jenkins, definitely a guy that should be cut, $14 million. So him, Quan Alexander, those guys should be gone. They really should. But also, you add that $10 million, now you're at $65 million. And then, I mean, they're hurting themselves. They are hurting themselves. And while Marcus Williams is a good player, in the situation that the Saints are in, you're really going to spend an extra $10 million to do that? The net gain, the net gain is probably negative in this situation because of the amount of players that you're going to have to cut to get back to zero as an effect of this. So I'm not a fan of it. But moving on, the next guy we have here is Allen Robinson. And I think this is a very smart move by the Chicago Bears, $17.9 million, because on the open market, we were talking about this. I thought Robinson was going to get paid $25 million. So $8 million more than his, or $7 million more once you had the 0.9, than his cap or his tag price. So the Bears, very smart move. Tag him for $18 million, bring him back for another year, help your other quarterback, whoever that is, whoever you bring in, whether it's Mac Jones, someone else. It's not going to be Trubisky, but whoever it is, bring back a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL to help that quarterback progress and get better, develop, help them feel more comfortable. Because without Robinson, I mean, you have Darnell Mooney, who's shown flashes. He showed that he can be a very good deep threat. He showed that he can be a good wide receiver. Is he a wide receiver one? Is he Allen Robinson? Absolutely not. Absolutely not at this point. Allen Robinson is a top 10 wide receiver. Absolutely makes 100% sense that they tagged him here at this 17.9 price tag, which I think is a steal.
Absolutely right. This is a huge, huge steal. Allen Robinson makes every single quarterback he plays with look better. And whoever it may be, it can't be Brandon Allen. Breaking news, he re-signed with the Bengals. Oh, breaking news, sure. I just kind of got on my Twitter, and I thought I'd share. But, he makes everybody else look good. And whether it's Mac Jones, whether they trade up, I don't know how they would, but don't rule it out, because I don't know what the deal is with the Bears. They seem to shock me every year. And their defense is good. Allen Robinson said it's not the end of the world. He doesn't not want to play for Chicago. He not blatantly say, I want out, unless I didn't hear it and I missed it. He said, I'm willing to go anywhere. And I think that having Allen Robinson, having a top 10 wide receiver, as you mentioned, play for the Bears again, just one more year, even if it is the last year, I think getting any quarterback settled in a place that really deserves a chance to contend, and a player that deserves a chance to contend, I think Allen Robinson staying with the Bears is an overall net gain and something that is inherently good.
Yeah, and we saw what the Bears can be with a good quarterback and a correctly functioning offense, what they can be. I mean, they were a 13-3. I believe they went 13-3 that season. And they made the playoffs. They lost in the playoffs in the wild card round because of Cody Parkey couldn't hit the field goal. That was the perfect epitome. Yep. Mitch is doing the double doink sign for all you podcast listeners. But I mean, because Cody Parkey, that was the perfect microcosm of that entire season, because Cody Parkey was like 50% from field goal. I mean, that's an over exaggeration, but he was not good kicking field goals that season, and that was the reason that they couldn't advance to the playoffs. But regardless, we saw that they can be a very good team with a working offense, and Allen Robinson was a part of that team. Mitch Trubisky is not the quarterback of the future for the Bears, but whoever you bring in, whoever is your starting quarterback, is going to improve because Allen Robinson is there. Keeping Allen Robinson is just that much bigger of a step towards success if you are the Chicago Bears.
Absolutely. The Bears, again, the Packers seem to be on top of the NFC North, and I don't think that they're going to be taken down this year. I think that you could probably give it to them. But could the Bears take over the Packers for number one? Highly unlikely, but their chances are significantly higher with a player like Allen Robinson. And again, it really depends on this offseason. It's too early to be making predictions, even though we do like to make a fair bit of those looking at to next year. But I think the Bears could be fighting for a 7th seed, which the Bears, like, they're not in a win now mode, okay? But they're not in the middle of a tank. They're just in a state of mediocrity. And this year they have to make a choice whether it's win or whether it's wait. And I don't know where the Bears are at right now. But with this Allen Robinson franchise tag, I think they're in a win.
It's kind of a similar situation to the Cowboys, but like to a lesser extent, because like the Bears, it's the reverse, right? It's the defense has been there and the offense is declining. So when you have something that's declining and something that is constant, well, what do? Because you have that constant consistency, consistent good coming from the defense, and the offense is just getting worse. So what do you do at that point? Interesting thing for the Bears, interesting situation for the Bears. What are they going to do in going forward at that quarterback spot as they're at pick 19? Something to monitor as we go into the free agency period, as we go into the draft, even going into next season. I know it's like you said, it's early, but something to keep your eye on because the Bears are a very interesting team, a very interesting situation. Now, let's keep it moving. Another wide receiver from the Super Bowl winning Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Chris Godwin, got franchise tagged to that $15.8 million projected tag. He's going to be returning to Tampa.
Honestly, there's not really much to say about this. Like, this Tampa cap hit, cap space, very minimal. But if you're going to spend 15 million of it on Chris Godwin, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that he's a very key part to the offense, and Bruce Arians did a good thing. Sure, they'll have a few guys hitting the open market, whatever, but spending a lot of money on a guy that really helped you get there is something that's important, and something we didn't mention. Levante David got signed for another 2 years. So the Bucs, they're here to stay, and they're going to try and run it back. Go for 2. I don't, because they don't like run it back. That's the Chiefs. Apparently, that's the Chiefs. Going for a second one. I think that they're riled up and ready. And signing Levante David, tagging Chris Godwin, I think that they're probably the best team in the NFC South, assuming the Panthers are like, if the Panthers offseason plan falls through, then it's like, okay, Tampa wins this. But unless something miraculous happens with any of the other NFC South teams, Tampa's loaded and they can easily still contend.
Something I think worth mentioning is, like you said, Levante David will be returning on a 2-year, $25 million contract. I will say, though, after this, after these 2 moves by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they are now over the salary cap by about rounding up $400,000, which is nothing insurmountable. That is easily to get back under. However, that pretty much means that Shaq Barrett is not returning to Tampa this offseason, because unless they can make up $18 million out of nowhere, which may be possible, they may be able to cut a few players to get to that spot to re-sign Shaq Barrett. But unless they can do that, Shaq Barrett will not come to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And that I don't think is a very realistic thing. I don't think you're just going to be able to get that $20 million required to sign Shaquille Barrett in this such limited time that they have. They have 5 days? 5 days into the legal tampering period. So they gotta get on it if they want to re-sign Shaq Barrett. I just don't see a way that it happens. Those are the implications of the Chris Godwin and Levante David signing. Looks like they were preparing for this anyway, with Shaq Barrett leaving. It's okay, though, because there are a lot of edge rushers in this draft. Definitely could pick up one at pick 32 or 64. Let's keep it going now. Under Chris Godwin, we have Justin Simmons, a guy that you called that would be tagged a couple weeks ago on the podcast. You said Justin Simmons would be franchise tagged by the Denver Broncos. Here he is, and he was the 3rd player, I want to say, or maybe the first. Oh, sorry.
No, I think he was the first one. He was tagged last Thursday or something
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, he was tagged very early, the first player to be tagged throughout the cycle for a projected price of $13.7 million. Broncos get arguably the best safety in football back.
Exactly. The best safety position. It's very loosely ranked. But regardless, I think the Broncos got a very good deal on a guy that's really important to their secondary. Again, the Broncos, I don't know if they're contending. I don't know what their deal is. A lot of teams are just scrunched in the middle where, like, okay, well, are you moving on from Drew Lock? There's a lot of questions to be answered. But I just think it's unfortunate for Justin Simmons. I think it's really unfortunate because, as we mentioned, top 3 safety, top 5 safety, top 10 safety could have been paid a lot. Could have gotten a lot more money than this, in my opinion. And the fact he's not locked up long term is also really unfortunate. I thought George Payton was going to be different. I thought he was going to get it done and be a completely different man at GM than John Elway. But there's still time to tell for that. And I get it. This is basically his first big move. But even still, it worries me that this can be a very similar Denver Broncos to what we've seen over the past 5 years, which is not what we should be seeing. There's a ton of guys that they still have a lot of cap room, okay, because they have, I think, upwards of $50 million. So realistically, keeping Justin Simmons for Denver's sake was the smartest thing they could have done. Franchise tagging him because they couldn't get a deal done. Yes, a little unfortunate for the man that got tagged.
Yeah, Justin Simmons. I mean, you just look at his market value and projected salary on SpotTrack.com. 5 years, $77 million. I
Sounds
mean,
right.
that sounds perfect. I mean, it sounds perfectly right. That annual average would come out to be about $15.4 million. So $2 million more than that franchise tag price. Nothing ridiculous, still something that should be given to him. But the key there is the years and just the amount of money. I mean, because those $2 million does add up to be 10 million extra in the long run, which is almost an extra year of that franchise tag. So pound for pound, what he deserves is vastly, vastly more than what he's getting with that franchise tag. Justin Simmons deserves better. Justin Simmons deserves more. And he's just not getting it. And it's sad. Like you said, because Justin Simmons is a phenomenal player. He deserves that recognition of being the highest paid free safety in the NFL at this point, because he's earned it, because he has earned that title. He's just earned the right to be called the highest paid free safety in the NFL. Next, we have a guy that I think surprised both you and me that got franchise tagged. That's going to be Cam Robinson, the left tackle for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Well, this guy's a good player, definitely a good player. You know, is he worth 13 or 14 million dollars? I'm not sure. I don't think so. I don't think he's worth that franchise tag, especially when you're the Jags sitting there at $74 million, highest amount in the NFL. I'd be using that on players to take my team to the next level instead of retaining players who are good but aren't going to help us win playoff games at this point.
Like looking at the Jaguars roster from last year as a whole, okay, the defense was terrible. Okay, there's literally nothing more to say than it was just anything short of embarrassing. It's not great. But again, that's what they plan to do. They traded away all their stars. Everyone's gone. Well, what were you going to expect? Their offense, I felt, have a lot of really good pieces around it. Their receivers were really good. I like DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault, two guys that are really good. But was this a fourth reason of panic because you didn't get any of the two wide receivers that were probably going to go to you if they didn't get tagged, honestly? Like they could have landed Allen Robinson, Chris Godwin, one or the other, even both with that amount of cap. I wouldn't recommend it, but just saying, it's a possibility. Was this a cause of panic because a lot of the stars were getting tagged? Maybe. I think there's a chance that that's the reason. But if this is not the greatest start to the Urban Meyer era, okay? Because it's not the end of the world. He didn't get signed to a huge deal. He's not committed to him for the long term. But like, I don't know that he was worth his tag. I'm not sure how much it was actually worth, but why would you? I'm sure there's like no one you should have really tagged, but even still, I wouldn't have tagged him. I'm not really clenching onto the past, even though their offensive line was average.
Yeah, nothing special. Cam Robinson, again, nothing special. So that's kind of maybe something we'll have to wait and see on because, will he pay dividends? Is there something that we don't know? Is he going to be phenomenal in 2021 based on his 2020 campaign? Probably not, but you never know. Cam Robinson could have a breakout year in 21. That's something to keep an eye on as he did get franchise tagged this offseason. Wrapping it up, we have a couple more players, a few more players, three more guys that got franchise tagged. First off is going to be Leonard Williams. He's getting projected $19.4 million through the franchise tag. That is a big price. And I believe, if I'm correct, the highest projected franchise tag at the moment out of any of these players on this list of players that did get tagged. And while he might not be the best player, I think he is arguably the most important to his team. He is extremely vital to the New York Football Giants' success, like we talked about in recent episodes. He's the guy. He's like that Marcus May type of player like we were talking about before. He's the guy that you look to. He elevates the play of everyone else on that team. He's the dude on the Giants.
He's your boy. We talked about him, how much money he should be getting, and I think that's absolutely right. I think $20 million is like around $20 million. Like, whoa, okay, like relax. But I think he should be paid a lot of money because of what he did to the Giants. Again, Giants a team where the football Giants, sorry, could be a team where it's like maybe they're ready. I don't know. Another Giants rumor that I kind of want to talk about a little bit. We might not, but Saquon Barkley, the Giants are questioning whether or not to pick up his fifth-year option. So I think that's pretty interesting because they are going to pay Leonard Williams for sure. And I think he deserves it. And I know you agree he deserves to be locked up. But Saquon, I just heard that. I forgot who posted that today. But that just it makes sense. Like, he's a phenomenal player and the Giants know that. But should they lock him up after – I don't think he's played a full season yet.
I think he played one full season, but other than that, been injured for 14 games in his third year. I think 6 games in his second year, something like that. So, when does that become concerning? Because at some point you got to say that player has an injury history. That player has an injury issue. Are we there yet with Saquon Barkley? I don't know. That's a discussion for another day. But Leonard Williams, I think $19 million in a normal contract would probably be too much. I think we both agree on that. But it's a franchise tag, and it's not supposed to be cheap. That's the whole point. And Leonard Williams, listen, he gets paid here. He gets paid, and I'm sure he's happy to stay with the Giants after a great 2020 campaign, 11.5 sacks, and he was just excellent. And the Giants are happy to have him back. He's happy to be back with the Giants. Hopefully, they can lock up a long-term deal like both sides hope that they can before that deadline in the summer. Now, 2 more offensive linemen to go here. Taylor Moton, for the offensive tackle for the Carolina Panthers, has quietly throughout the last season or so, he's quietly been one of the better tackles in the league. He gets tagged here. Panthers gonna keep him around for whoever their quarterback for the future is. We know how vital tackles are.
Absolutely. Tackles get a lot of credit. The next guy does not get enough, but I think that sure, tag him, fair. Offensive line is very important. Tackles very important, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think he's a good player, and it's important to have some familiarity on the offensive line because you don't want to be mixing it up too much. If you mess up what kind of works, then you're usually high risk, high reward. And that high risk, if it fails, leads to your quarterback scrambling for his life. And that's how you ruin a quarterback. We've seen
That's
it
how
happen
you get
numerous
Carson
times.
Wentz.
Well, I mean, he had a good offensive line that one year, his MVP year.
Yeah, well, he had a great offensive line MVP year, and then it quickly declined. Injuries on the offensive line. Bad offensive line. Now you see what happens.
You can even use Mahomes in the Super Bowl, even a guy that's superhuman throwing upside down. Like you got to lock him up and having familiarities instead of switching your offensive line formation not like 12 times in the season like the Eagles have had to do. So we see what it costs, and the Panthers management, Matt Rule, he knows what he's doing. I like what's going on down there. I think it's a little unfortunate this didn't go to none one of our favorite players, Curtis Samuel, but I think that's fair. And not tagging Curtis Samuel, I mean, there's a ton of great receivers in the draft. It's really just going to be interesting to see where they go receiver wise to replace a pretty decent size gap.
I will say, I'm not that sad that that Samuel didn't get franchise tagged, because even though the Packers are like $5 million under or over at this point, there's still a little bit of hope in my heart that we can sign either Corey Davis.
Always got to have a little bit of hope.
Little bit of hope is nothing bad for you. Either Corey Davis. Depends what it is. Either Corey Davis or my definitely preferred option, Curtis Samuel. I definitely want Curtis Samuel to be a Packer in 2020. That would be probably my dream scenario, to have him come to Green Bay. But I'm happy about that, but still probably not realistic. But regardless, Taylor Moton returning to the Carolina Panthers, that is big for the Panthers, big news for them. Obviously huge. Anytime you can lock up a franchise tackle and get him back there, it's huge, because quarterbacks need tackles. I don't care who you are, you're not going to be successful without a tackle. That was perfectly put on display with Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. He was just bad. He was not that good. And it was because his offensive line couldn't protect anyone. Now, like you said, the next guy on this list doesn't get enough credit. Brandon Scherff, top 5 guard in the league, for sure. He got franchise tagged yesterday evening after the Marcus May and the Dak Prescott re-signing. Too many quarterback trades. It's my default. But
yep.
Brandon Scherff returning to the same division as Dak Prescott to the Washington football team, the nation's capital.
And I think that the capital needs some good protection, and Brandon Scherff provides that. Sorry, I had to do a play on words right there. I tried. It was pretty funny, but we're going to roll with it. I think that he's a quality offensive lineman, and the Washington football team, I believe, is a pretty good offensive line as far as I'm concerned. And if you look around the NFC East, which they play twice a year, that's 6 games. How many of those teams have a scary pass rush? Eagles, their pass rush is aging. Cowboys pass rush is okay. Well, maybe not. And the Giants pass rush seems to be pretty good. So putting him back, even just for a year, they're going to negotiate a contract. I think this is a guy they absolutely have to lock up for 4 years at least. And I don't think that's negotiable.
Agree. Offensive line, so important. And also, this team is going to be getting a new quarterback. So they need to make sure that the new quarterback is protected so that that guy can develop to his full potential. Now, moving on from tag news, there was reports earlier that big reports, but got overshadowed from all the concrete fact-breaking news that came out yesterday and today. Albert Breer, a NFL reporter, reported that 10 or so players across the league have been brought up in trade talks. Now, we picked 3 of those players to talk about and give our trade fits where we think they could go. So let's jump right into it. The biggest name out of the entire list was Stefan Gilmour, 2019 Defensive Player of the Year, at 6 interceptions that season. Incredible player, incredible cornerback. Now, Mitch, where do you think his trade fit is?
I have him going in the land of Believeland, Cleveland Browns. I mean, my main thing here, looking at it, was like, okay, who will actually be willing to trade for him and what his actual trade price will be. And if you look at Cleveland, if Cleveland gives a hefty draft pick thrown at the Patriots, like just a package, that's not going to damage the Browns' future, okay? Because this is a young team that has a lot of great players offensively, defensively. I mean, offensively, Odell's been rumored and Tom Brady wants him there. Not happening. I'm sorry for you fans there. Not happening. But the defense is really good. Denzel Ward, another really great corner. And if they pick another one up in the draft in the later rounds, having Denzel Ward and Stefan Gilmore seems pretty darn good to me, if you ask. Like, Stefan Gilmore, he won Defensive Player of the Year for a reason. The Patriots may have struggled last year, but he did not. He had a really great campaign. And you know what? Sam and I mentioned this seems to be every week. We don't like stats. I don't care that his numbers were down or low. He's still a really great corner, and that's all that matters.
Stefan Gilmore, yeah, I mean, do not let the 7-9 record for the Patriots fool you. I mean, Stefan Gilmore was a very, very good cornerback in 2020. He still was very, very good. And any team that gets him is going to be getting a very talented cornerback. I think I like the Browns fit, and I think that does work. However, I think something that makes more sense in my mind is the Jacksonville Jaguars. You put him on the Jaguars, who are a super young team. You put a former defensive player of the year, who is, I believe, 29 or 30 now, on a team with a lot of rookie starters. I think that is going to do wonders for those young guys' development, because Gilmore is going to bring a lot of knowledge of playoff success, personal success, how to be great, how to be a great player. Also, CJ Henderson, second-year cornerback, is going to benefit so much from Stefan Gilmore, so much. He can move into that CB2 role while Gilmore takes over the number one wide receivers, while Henderson still develops, learns, and grows. The Jags have more than enough cap space to get this trade done. They also have a lot of draft capital, even though I don't think Gilmore is going to take a ridiculous amount of draft capital to trade for. I think this is a opportunity that the Jaguars cannot pass up, and I love this fit. I think it would do wonders for their development in terms of all the rest of their players and their development overall as a team.
I think that's pretty fair. I think experience is something that's really undervalued defensively, especially. And we have to look at it where the Jaguars are now in it to win it at this point. They've done everything right as far as the season goes. They tanked. They won Trevor Lawrence. Now build a team around him. Urban Meyer's more capable of doing that. Now he's actually allowed to use the money. So I think that him going to Jacksonville, it makes perfect sense. Now, the second guy that we're going to be talking about is someone that's seemingly, I think, starting to decline a fair bit, which is unfortunate, but is still a quality player, Zach Ertz from the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, Sam, where do you have him going?
I have Zach Ertz going to the Colts because I think this is a very good fit, and I think this is the obvious fit as well. Zach Ertz to the Colts, connection with Carson Wentz. We already know how good they can be together. In 2017, Zach Ertz had, I believe, a career year, and he was clearly Carson Wentz's favorite target. Clearly. I mean, Zach Ertz was the number one guy for Carson Wentz. Well, how do you have Carson Wentz succeed? Give him back his number one target. Get that guy back into that offense. And also Trey Burton, who is the Indianapolis Colts receiving tight end, is going to be a free agent this offseason because he signed a one-year deal last offseason. So Zach Ertz can perfectly slide right into that role. Still a declining player, but still has the skills to be a very productive receiving tight end. As well, Jack Doyle is not really a receiving threat, even though he is semi-productive in that category, more of a blocking tight end. So Zach Ertz can be a productive veteran target in that offense, a reliable guy that Carson Wentz and Frank Reich are familiar with. I think this is a match made in heaven. I think it's perfect, and I think you can't go wrong if you're the Colts by bringing in Ertz.
Now, look, as much as I'd love to see this 2017 Eagles reunion, I'd love to see it. I mean, Eagles on the Colts, copy paste, seems fine. I mean, Cardinals are basically doing it. I wouldn't be shocked if they shift off their whole team and Kyler Murray for Deshaun Watson, for all I know. Like, honestly, chemistry is very important, and I think that's something that makes it just makes this trade make sense. Okay, because we see what Zach Ertz's best career year was. We saw who was his quarterback. the guy that just got traded there, yeah, that makes sense. But I don't know if they're going to do double business, which is why I tried to stray away from the Colts. They did one trade. I mean, not just going to trade a million times with one team. This isn't Madden. I like to do that constantly in franchise mode. But, you know, a team that lacks weapons, the Patriots, I think that if he lands in New England with Bill Belichick, I think Bill Belichick knows how to use his tight ends. I mean, with the exception of this year, and I'm not comparing Zach Ertz to Gronk, but this is a vertical threat. And the Patriots, look at their roster just now. They don't really have a vertical threat. Okay. And N'Keal Harry just seemed to fall flat on his face, disappointing. Julian Edelman getting up there, and you know, no one else is really there. So it really depends on their quarterback. The Patriots have a lot of work to do this offseason, but bringing in a guy that's a really reliable target and I like a lot, I think that by adding Zach Ertz adds probably the only piece to this Patriots offense.
Yeah, I think both are good fits. I think both make a little bit of sense. I just honestly think there's too much correlation and corresponding factors that make sense between the Colts and the Eagles. And listen, I just think that's the most realistic situation. I think it also just makes the most sense. Now, this is a guy that is getting a little bit up there in age, just as productive as he has ever been throughout the course of his career, though. And this guy definitely doesn't get enough credit. Brandon Brooks, guard from, again, the Philadelphia Eagles. That's a team that is really going to have to get under the salary cap, really work to get under the salary cap. So Brandon Brooks could absolutely be traded. Brandon Brooks, I have him being traded to the Seattle Seahawks. I think this is perfect because you look at the Seattle Seahawks. They have Mike Upati starting at their guard, at one of their guard positions. Well, Upati, he's aging. He's nothing really special. He's decent. He's a solid player. Brandon Brooks, he's been a Pro Bowler the last 3 seasons that he's played on the field. He didn't play in 2020, but 2017 through 2019, all 3 times he made the Pro Bowl. So this is a guy that you're talking about that is still an exceptional player. This is a team in the Seahawks that is clearly going to have to get offensive line help because Russell Wilson is not happy. They are going to need to get offensive line help. Brandon Brooks is an exceptional player at that position. Go out, get a veteran guard who is going to make your quarterback immediately happy, and you aren't really going to have to give up a lot of draft capital because the Eagles are going to need to dump off a lot of cap.
Now, see, that's you hit the biggest point, which is by trading for Brandon Brooks, does this make Russell Wilson want to stay? Because that's the biggest issue that the Seahawks have to deal with this offseason. It's not really can they get their defense in order. It's literally can they retain Russell Wilson for the remainder of his contract at least. By trading for Brandon Brooks, I think that makes sense. Sure, Mike Upati is not what he was with the Cardinals, but still a aging okay vet player. But Brandon Brooks may be aging and he may be a vet, but is still a really good player. Now, a team that I think also needs an offensive line beyond the Bengals, because I don't think that they would necessarily risk taking Samuel Cosmi or whoever it may be, risking it, because this is a guy that could be worth the first rounder, dare I even say it, but I think he is. And if someone didn't offer me a first rounder, I'd question why they're trying to make this trade. But I think that he will land with the Chargers. This is a young team with a young quarterback, a young core, a lot of really quality players with a really bad offensive line. Don't let Justin Herbert overshadow how terrible his offensive line is. It's just not as bad as some other teams in retrospect. And adding a guard there and drafting another tackle or another guard, or realistically anywhere in this draft, I think that the Chargers can have a stronger offensive line and a stronger campaign next year because of this trade.
For sure. So that is going to wrap it up for episode 38 of the First and Goal podcast. I'm Sam Levine, joined by Mitch Weinberg. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of the First and Goal podcast. And guys, me and Mitch just kick-started the Instagram account, First and Goal _ at the end. That is the Instagram account. So please go drop a follow, support that. We would very much appreciate that. Also, subscribe to the podcast, leave a rating. Always appreciate that. It helps us out with the podcast algorithm. Also, go swing by the YouTube page, First and Goal on YouTube. Subscribe, drop some likes, share with a friend. That is the place for shorter analysis and opinion videos. Also, me and Mitch are going to be doing a couple mock draft specials over on YouTube. So that is definitely something to watch out for. Also, the website, firstandgoalfootballtalk.com, is the place for all the articles, NFL, NCAA, everything. That is all there. And then finally, the Twitter, First and Goal FB, to stay in the loop on everything going on here at First and Goal. So until next time, Sam and Mitch signing off.